Holy Gospel this morning is taken from the 25th chapter of Matthew, starting with verse 31. When the Son of Man, this is Jesus speaking, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it for one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." Then they also will answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated. You know, I think our first hymn, "All Are Welcome," should kind of be the banner hymn of this congregation. Because I love it, and as I sang it again this morning, I thought, you know, this really does seem to be true of this congregation. At least you hear so many people say that as they join, that they just felt so welcome. So maybe we should make note of that. This is a personal and frankly candid account and reflection of the week I spent volunteering at the San Diego-Tijuana border in January. The San Isidro port of entry there is the largest and busiest pedestrian and vehicle land border in the world. Called Sanctuary Caravan, this mission that I participated in was sponsored in large part by the American Friends Service Committee and several other similar organizations. The AFSC is part of the Society of Friends, the Quaker Church, as many of you probably know. I was there from mid-December to mid-January. Quakers, just for a little background, are one of the three historic peace churches in our country, along with the Church of the Brethren and the Mennonites. Quaker theology recognizes that of Christ in every person, no exceptions, and that's why they, with the others, are pacifist in their theology and in their the living out of their faith, because there is that of Christ in every single person, and refer to people everywhere, including immigrants, on this trip as friends. Not strangers, not just fellow members, but friends. So this is a story about Jesus. Days 1 and 2. My sanctuary caravan trip took place during the government shutdown in January, if you remember. I was concerned about my flights because of the chaos at the airports, and sure enough, the trip took 2 days instead of 1. My original flight was delayed several hours due to maintenance. Thank goodness they had enough maintenance workers working to be able to do that, but it cost me my connecting flight to Dallas. American Airlines provided passengers with a room in a hotel for the night, which was lovely. So instead of being able to be in San Diego and sleep in the next morning to get a good start for the week, which started with training all day on that first day, I ended up at 4:30 a.m. to catch an early flight to San Diego, and the day had begun. TSA folks are generally rather stern, if any of you have noticed that. They're very serious about their job, and so they should be. But it didn't take much to break through this typical sternness and get a few of them to laugh or even smile. Partly because I had applied for a new driver's license, which had been lost, and it did not come in time. So I had no picture ID, and I had not brought my passport. And so getting through TSA was a little bit of a challenge, but I kind of joked my way through it, which is what I sometimes do, and got people laughing and carrying on. So I decided that was my ministry in transit to the border, to try to crack a smile on some of these very serious faces. After all, as we say when faced with annoyances like missing your flight and things going awry, if this is the worst thing I have to deal with, my life is pretty darn easy. So I couldn't get grumbly or annoyed or angry. I was just eager to see what the first day at the border would bring. Days 3 and 4. Training with roughly 20 other volunteers spanning races, genders, ages, denominations, even religions. There was a Jewish fellow there, and there was one Muslim person there. This is the last week, or it was the last week of the 40-day, 40-night sanctuary caravan effort. So encouraging it was to see and meet younger adults, the 20-somethings, bright, strong in faith and love of the teachings of Jesus, full of energy and commitment to serving our friends as they would serve Jesus, who was himself, as you might have picked up in our second reading, a refugee with his parents as they took flight from governmental violence directed against Jesus when he was just a toddler, less than 2 years old, they think. I learned a lot about how U.S. immigration laws have been, this personal opinion, have been so convoluted or even ignored as to making entering the country so incredibly confusing and difficult, particularly if you are of brown skin, that the process itself is traumatizing. And in the adult forum, not so much this week, but next week, we're going to talk more about that whole process and look at the ELCA study document on immigration, as well as some scripture. As my 3 trips to our companion synod, Honduras, one just a few weeks ago, which we'll learn more about today, as those trips can testify, many of our friends are being actively hunted down by the gangs, even as they come and try to enter the United States. These gangs, which virtually run entire communities, these are a step above gangs that we have typically in our cities. These are gangs that are spun out of the cartels, the drug cartels, extremely violent, and often include or are even run by police and government officials. So to go to the police for help is a real iffy thing and might be even dangerous because they might be part of the whole deal. To that end, and being extorted, people, they're threatened with death or death of family members or of their children or torture or all kinds of things. So to that end, we weren't allowed to take any pictures or name the people, the shelters, the border agents, the military personnel, because it increases the danger many of our friends were already in. You think they don't scan the internet? You think they don't have access to all the same kinds of information you and I do, the gangs? So they will sometimes often hunt people, keep hunting them, even if they've come to the States. The people doing the on-the-ground work at the shelter, whom we were assisting, were absolutely amazing. 12 14-hour days were not uncommon. No days off unless somebody volunteered to work for you. And you can imagine the logistical and administrative nightmare that all could be, coordinating with other serving groups in the city, managing so many people coming in and going out daily, friends, volunteers, all from these different organizations, doing all the legal paperwork, which they do when the friends come in, and keeping everything organized. The place that I worked at picked up people who had been approved to apply for citizenship and have been released from detention. They're put in detention before they can even apply. Border Patrol sometimes delivers friends to the shelter, but they will also frequently just dump them off at a nearby McDonald's with absolutely nothing. And the shelter staff would go pick them up and bring them to the shelter where quick medical exams were done to check for serious illness or contagious illnesses. Legal paperwork was done to help move things along for them. Showers were taken. Do we recognize that a simple shower after you've been walking perhaps weeks or months through the desert, warm, running water, all you want, is actually a luxury? I saw especially women as I escorted them to where the showers were, look in and just light up when they saw, and thank you, oh, thank you, thank you. I'm not sure it ever occurred to me what a luxury that is. They provided phone calls to loved ones, whether they were in their home country or here waiting for them, and provided nutritious meals and cots for them to sleep in. Those phone calls were often very emotional, as you can imagine, people hearing for the first time that their loved one was safe in the States, even though things were not finished at all. Children had a small playroom indoors and an area outside, a limited space outside. The idea of this shelter and their work was to try to get these folks on their way to their final destination within 24 hours. Because there's always another large group coming in the next day. We had 92 men, women, and children come in one day alone. 80 had come in the day before. So that's what I mean. If you can imagine the logistics of trying to get all of these people nourished and clothed and showered and try to get them on their way. Of course, the work we were doing there with the people with whom we were doing it was all legal. These were not illegal immigrants. They had come through the border, and even though they came through legally, they're put in detention, and then finally, if they were approved to apply for asylum or citizenship, then they're released and just kind of set adrift. So they still live in a lot of fear based on what they had experienced, even though they are here now. And they live to learn to be afraid, even here. Seeing young moms in ankle monitors, those big black heavy things, as they read or played with their beautiful and very innocent and sometimes quite precocious children, crushed my heart. These moms were sometimes just in their early 20s, walking around with this ankle monitor. Since the monitors are a symbol of what in the United States? Criminality. That's easily what people assume about them when they see them on the street, even though migration and immigration is something human beings have been doing since the beginning of time. Both are international and national rights by law. Immigration is not a criminal act. And let me say here that these are all people who are trying to enter the country legally, and yet they have to walk around with these monitors that are generally used for people under house arrest or whatever. I got to play with some of the children for a couple of hours, one day in particular, and you know what? Kids are kids. no matter where they were born and no matter what language they speak, and you don't even have to talk the same language to be able to play. And what did the grade school age children want to do for play? Because that's what it was for them. Practice saying and writing the alphabet and numbers in English up to 100. They are bright, these young ones, and very likely to be helping to teach their parents English and the many social customs they will learn from other children. The littler ones were happy coloring, playing dress up, building Legos, playing restaurant and serving intriguing pretend meals, even more intriguing since you couldn't always understand what it was that was being served to you. Just kids. Could have been any Sunday school nursery during worship. These friends were expecting, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. But that's not what they and so many other immigrant groups throughout our history experienced on their arrival. I and so many others so strongly believe it's our privilege as Christians to put skin on Jesus' powerful teaching, as you have done it, not done it for me, the least of these, my family. You have done or not done it for me. Day 5. Spent the afternoon and evening at the shelter, packing family backpacks. There were these big tents set up out in the parking lot, staffed by California state social workers who were sent there for, I think, about 2 months at least, as part of their job to help run and distribute all of this. So we packed these family back. Every time a bus came in, they'd jot down, they'd get all their names and sizes, the children, the adults, everybody, run to the tents, and then we'd try to fill backpacks per family with exactly the sizes and the items they needed. So everything from toiletries, shampoo, soap, toothbrushes, toothpaste, diapers for babies, which some of the moms, again, were just ecstatic over, clean underwear, and at least one change of clothes. All of these things had been donated. I also spent time that day playing with children, 3 to 6-year-old girls, and I choo-choo trained around the front, where they all hang on. And of course, they wanted me to be the engine. I don't know why, they're this big, I'm this big. They wanted me to be out front pulling. Stopping wherever there was a person or person standing or sitting around and asking if they wanted a Coca-Cola. And we watched a DVD of Winnie the Pooh in Spanish. That day, I also escorted families to the showers, to dinner, whatever needed to be done. It all comes under the heading hospitality. All the volunteers were initially assigned certain jobs, but often you end up doing whatever is needed if your particular job finishes up early, so you had to be very flexible. I found that a good-sized smile and bienvenidos, welcome, greatly brightened the faces of even the most anxious-looking people, which were most of them. One young girl, I'd guess 10 or 12 years old, came out of a tent where docs and nurses were treating those with minor illness, minor things, or things like head lice, and she apparently had head lice. That's why they check everybody before they come in. And those nurses were rubbing in the whatever stuff they used just so tenderly, almost like giving these girls a massage, these kids a massage. This young girl came out with this stinky stuff. They had to leave it on for like 15 or 20 minutes and then come back and have it rinsed out. Well, she came out with this stinky stuff on her hair and a poorly fitting clear shower cap kind of hanging over it and onto her face. And she looked, as you can imagine, just miserable. I touched her shoulder as I escorted her into her family, looked her in the eye, and with a twinkle in my eye, I said, "Que bonita, how pretty." She just stared at me a few seconds like, "What?" And then we both giggled. She understood that I was teasing. A simple gesture, just to take a little shame away, brings such joy in both the receiver and the giver. It's important to recognize that our friends not only have a lot of needs, they have so many gifts, so much to give and to teach us as well. They've been terribly victimized by gangs and the government at home, then sometimes by the immigration process itself. Remember, I keep saying these are people who are legally trying to enter the country, but they are so much, much more than victims. It doesn't take much effort to see the images of Christ in each one of them, the suffering Christ, and to relate to them accordingly. And as always, the littlest ones are just so precious. This means that none of the volunteers are heroes coming to rescue the victims. Somebody called me that, "Oh, you're such a hero," and I said, "Am not." Am not a hero, I'm a servant, and there's a huge, huge difference. So I say again, as Christians, both ourselves and these our friends coming north, coming from overwhelmingly Christian countries, have we thought of that? These are not just foreigners, these are fellow Christians. These are not aliens, illegals, certainly not invaders, racists, and murderers. They're even more than our friends. As fellow Christians, and Jesus said this himself in the gospel reading, all of us are baptized into Christ, and they are family. Brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. We welcome them to the United States as we welcome our own families from abroad or from anywhere, even as we welcome Christ into our homes. Day 6, that was Friday. I spent most of the time working with volunteers again who were in charge of clothing donations and distribution. I don't know how many weeks, months some of them had been there, but they were some of the hardest working people I've ever met. If you've ever known a dedicated social worker, you know what I mean. And they were also a hoot to boot. Funny, finding humor in sometimes the dumbest things, but it was just made it really fun. And as with other aspects, this work was also a sizable organizational challenge. And while sometimes one or the other would get cranky, who could blame them? They were pushed forward no matter what types of folks, fun and inspiring to work with. My last day was unforgettable. In the playroom with a bunch of the kids, ages roughly 4 to 12 or so, they'd come in and out, but some of them parked there and played for hours. Several of the boys, ages 5, 7, and 12, and a tiny little 4-year-old girl, cutie, wanted to practice writing and pronouncing the English letters and numbers. So as I wrote them on a small whiteboard propped on the floor against the wall, this little 4-year-old popped up and stepped over to me and asked me a question. Her face, as little kids do, about 12 inches from mine, when they really want to know something. But I couldn't understand what she was wanting to know because of my limited Spanish. I can speak some, but I did not understand what she was saying. And she looked at me like, as little kids will, if you say, "I don't know," like, how can you not know what I'm saying? I'm speaking Spanish, what's the matter with you? So she seemed, then in the midst of that, she seemed to just freeze. She kept staring at me, again, her face very close. No blinking, no movement whatsoever, her face totally blank. I asked, "Está bien? Are you okay?" Nothing. I asked again, "Está bien?" Nothing. These boys, God bless them, looked a little concerned as they sat at their table, but remained very quiet and patient. It's like they knew this just wasn't it changes people. Even young children, young boys, to be patient and understand something was happening here that was very serious. Then she turned her face away from mine a bit and took a step or two and just stared off into space. Suddenly her eyes opened wide like saucers, and a look of absolute terror came across her face. We're in the playroom. I don't know what she was seeing or remembering, but again, she just remained standing there motionless, looking terrified. I'm on a tiny little chair, which I hoped the whole time would support me, not being a little preschooler. And I stretched out my arms toward her and quietly said, "Benaka, come here." Nothing. I moved my arms a little bit closer and said, "Benaka, come here." Nothing. I was leaning, I was able to finally reach under her arms and very slowly pick her up. You know, you don't want to invade their space or startle or whatever. You have to respect every person. Very gently picked her up and brought her to my lap, where she curled up in a ball and buried her head into my neck. I nuzzled her head with my cheek as I kissed her, whispering, "Está bien. It's okay. Está bien." Admirably, the boys remained quiet and patient. We sat there for several minutes. I wasn't quite sure what to do except to just hold her and try to make her feel like she was safe. After a few moments, she raised her head and looked right at me in the eyes again, quietly got down off my lap, and walked as if sleepwalking to the room across the hall, which was the dormitory where her mother was. She's 4 years old. And that's the last I saw her. That's just one child. And you wonder how many others are carrying those sorts of memories and that kind of trauma. 4 years old. After the very moving and disturbing experience with this little girl, seeming to have some kind of vivid flashback to something, most likely where she and her family came from, which frightened her. I mean, these are families who have seen family members shot right in front of them, shot right in their own living rooms, children standing there and all. But the boys, after all of this, and I kind of got our composure and continued practicing English letters and numbers. After just a few minutes, I realized that some of the dads who had stopped in to check on their kids had fully entered the playroom and were standing behind their kids, participating in what we were doing. They were wanting to learn something of English also. After a few more minutes, a mother entered and joined in. The only problem was that this little playroom was now getting very crowded, and it was hard for the children to play. So one of the shelter's staff people came to the door, saw this neat thing that was spontaneously going on, and said, "Vámonos." Anybody watch Dora the Explorer? What does "vámonos" mean? Let's go. He had us to an actual classroom, an empty classroom, that had a huge whiteboard, two of them on the wall. So these dads and kids and this mom all found a place to sit, and I took my place up at the whiteboard, and we kept going, now with words and phrases. I was trying to think of words, phrases that might be particularly useful to them, like, as one example, abogado is in English lawyer, because they were going to be having a lot of dealings with lawyer. And just we covered the whole board. And then a few began to ask how to say some words in English, like Dios, God, orar, to pray, iglesia, church, en el nombre de Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Isn't it interesting that those were among the words, the English words they wanted to learn? Thankfully, I had the Google Translator on my cell phone, which is a very handy device, by the way, so I could check out words and phrases I couldn't remember from way back in college. And we had a few good laughs out of that, because sometimes if you translate something directly, word for word, sometimes you don't get the sense of what's trying to be said. Anyway, we had some good laughs with that. They stayed for at least a half an hour. We laughed a good bit between them trying to speak English. There's some letters in English they have a terrible time with, J being one of them, and me trying to speak Spanish. Don't ask me to roll my R's. By then, lunch was being served. An hour or so later, many of the kids were out in front playing outside, again with a few of their parents supervising. My shift and my week there were over. And as I walked out the door of a place that had become almost a second home in just a few short days, I walked out the door along the front of the building where the children were playing, and I heard, "Adios, John." Joan, that long, they just can't get that. And the J is kind of a J, John. And in Spanish, you pronounce every vowel. So if there's, we'd say Joan, but if there's an A there in Spanish, you pronounce the A also. So I got all choked up, as I often do, but called back, "Adios, amigos, buena suerte, good luck." So hard to leave, knowing I was heading back to a very comfy hotel, then hop on a plane the next day to return to a comfy and safe home and neighborhood. These friends are our extended family in Christ. If I learned nothing else that week, I learned that. Not by anything we or they do or did. They're not our family because we decide to think of them that way, but by what Jesus did. For he is our peace, Paul writes in Ephesians. In his flesh, he has made us into one and has broken down the dividing wall. That is the hostility between us. We build them, he tears them down, walls. So at the beginning, I said this was a sermon about Jesus. Remembering the gospel read earlier, I'll end with a question for you. Where was he? Amen.